I am currently rocking the Volk CE28s. As far as wheel specs go, these are the 18 by 9.5, and they have a pretty aggressive. I don't know if you can see it or not, and I may even have some pictures of when I got the fenders pulled originally. What is happening, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. Another video on the Subi. We've got a bit of a engine rebuild going on the STi. As you can see, the engine is gone, and it has been gone for a little while. If you have not caught the last few videos, definitely make sure you go check those out. We've done basically a full update on where things are at, why I'm in this position, and we've even started purchasing some of the big parts to start rebuilding this thing. So if you want to know more about what's going on with that, definitely go check out the last few videos. I was trying to think of some other, I guess, video ideas that I could make while the car is obviously not moving. And one of the most probably frequently asked questions I get on Instagram is, what are my wheel specs? Definitely have liked to make sure things are nice and aggressive on the Subaru. You know, I'm trying to get rid of those super positive wheel offsets that us Subaru guys have to always deal with. One of the most popular follow-up questions after I usually tell people what the wheel specs are is, how do you fit those wheels? Because everywhere I've looked, it said that you cannot fit that spec. I figure what we do today is go over exactly the wheel specs that I currently have on the car and exactly what I have ultimately done to the fenders to allow them to fit without rubbing. And I know a lot of people, and I know even myself back in the day when I was initially first looking into new wheels for the car, it was always quite confusing. You'd obviously see a ton of people rocking really aggressive wheels, but then at the same exact time, all you'd hear on the forums is that it's impossible to run these wheels and all you're gonna do is end up rubbing on your fenders. So my hopes is that in this video, we can discuss ultimately what my wheel specs are, what I've done to the fenders, and also what I was going to do is I was going to backtrack, and by going over a few of my previous setups and wheel specs and what I had to do to fit them, hopefully it can give people a better idea. So if anything, consider this video maybe a little bit of a fitment guide if you have especially a GD, so anything from like the 02 through to the 07s. 05 to 07 STIs are a little bit different as far as this little bit of a trim piece on the back, the rear quarter panel. As far as wheel fitment, I'd say all these cars really are the same. A little bit more different work goes into obviously modifying the rear fenders on the 05 to 07. I'd say a little more work, if anything. And now I'm gonna get into exactly the wheel specs I have currently. I know for a lot of you, you may be looking to run a wheel that's not necessarily this aggressive. The different kind of stages that I've gone through with my own car hopefully clears some stuff up for all of you at home trying to do something similar. I am currently rocking the Volk CE28s. They're like the black edition, diamond dark gunmetal. I bought these wheels probably, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago now, and I absolutely love them. Still to this day, like the color in the sun, it pops so much. And then obviously in the night, it looks very dark. And I have absolutely no plans on changing them anytime soon. As far as wheel specs go, these are the 18 by 9.5, and they have a +22 offset. The tire, a 245/40/18. It does not require any spacers at all to run it. The offset on this wheel, if you can see that, there is obviously tons of clearance. I am running coilover suspension. I have ISC coilovers as well. I have the additional camber plates in the rear, just to give you a little bit of an idea for how they fit. By the way, do not mind my separated side skirt here. It's pulled off on both sides. The shop needed to pull the side skirts off just to get it on the lift. But yeah, you can see pretty aggressive. And even in the video, I don't know if you can already tell how the fenders have been pulled. I don't know if you can see it or not, but, and I'm probably gonna post some pictures just throughout the different you know, wheel setups that I've had as I talk through them here. And I may even have some pictures of when I got the fenders pulled originally. So this right here, this is the current setup. And I am going to get further into exactly what's been done to the fenders and how I achieved this. But I'm just going to kind of explain it through the different wheel setups. Those of you at home that don't need to run a 9.5 22 offset wheel, you guys get a better idea for what you ultimately need to do to your own cars. So long before I ever modified these fenders or upgraded these wheels, obviously I just had the, and I love these wheels, the stock gold BBS. They were a 17-inch diameter wheel. They were 8 inches wide, and they had a plus 53 offset. Right off the bat, you can tell a lot more positive of an offset. That's one thing about these Subarus, and I think all of us, you know, that have them will realize, is we all want to run aggressive wheels. That's what everyone wants to do. But from factory, Subaru doesn't want to make it easy. Typically, we all see wheels out there, and the ones that we like are the ones that are often very deep dish or have a very concave face to them. Typically, they'll be a much wider wheel, and also even more so, it's because of their offset. They will have a much more aggressive or a lower offset to be able to make the face that much deeper. The wheels that ultimately we all want to run because of the way they look are often the wheels that seem impossible to run. Initially, I had the stock wheels, and like everybody, I wanted something that was a little more aggressive. At the time, I was still on my stock suspension. Ended up going for some XXR wheels. I was much younger. For those that don't know, I've had this car for like at least 12, 13 years. And so at the time, that's all I could afford. And I wanted something that was cooler, and I wanted something that was more aggressive. So I ended up getting the XXR 527 wheels, and they were bright orange. The spec they were in, 18 by 8.75 with a plus 35 offset. Obviously the wheels weren't quite a full inch wider than my stock wheels, but they did have nearly, well, I guess 18 millimeters more aggressive of an offset, being that they're a 35 instead of a 53. So 0.75 inches wider, not even quite 9 inches wide, a more aggressive offset. And on my stock suspension, I had zero issues. I obviously tossed the wheels on, fit perfectly fine. I had no rubbing issues. But obviously, there comes a time where you don't want to be a monster truck anymore, and you want to have proper fitment, so you want to lower your car. That's when obviously more of the issues will start. I did not have money for coilovers like I do now. Instead, I ended up going with lowering springs because that's all I could afford, and ended up finding actually a used set of, I think it was Tane, I think that's how you pronounce it, Tane or Tyne lowering springs. And so I scooped those up and ended up pulling out the factory struts, renting some spring clamps, clamping down the struts, pulling the top hats off, pulling the old springs out, adding the lowering springs, putting them all back together, and getting them back on the car. As soon as I did that, as you can imagine, the car was looking amazing. It was the best it's ever looked. It finally had that fitment that I was always dreaming of. So just sitting on the garage floor, it looked incredible. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it was a 225 40/18 tire, so definitely a decently stretched tire, and I did that obviously to try and limit any rubbing issues. But as soon as I went for a test drive, a couple buddies in the back seat, instantly what ended up happening on any of the bad dips and bumps was I was getting a ton of rubbing issues, and the fender was just digging into the tire sidewall. So as soon as I got back home, obviously I had little strips of rubber that had been peeled off from where the fenders obviously scraped them, so I had a nice big gouge in my fresh tires. So that's just to show you that, I mean, and given coilovers are way stiffer than lowering springs, but on stock struts with lowering springs and an 18 by 8.75 wheel, 35 offset, it rubbed. Obviously, the fronts are not really the biggest concern on these cars. You can kind of get around those typically with just rolling them, and you can even kind of give them a slight pull when you roll them too if you really need to. So the fronts really aren't the concern. Ends up being the rears. Yeah, on that wheel setup with a nice stretch tire, I ended up having a bunch of rubbing issues. Now, my way around that was adding rear camber bolts. So once I added in the rear camber bolts, obviously then I could add a bunch of negative camber on the rear wheels, and then that actually gave me enough clearance so I didn't have any major rubbing issues anymore on the lowering springs. But as you can imagine, the lowering springs lasted for a little while. I don't know if it was the following summer, I just said screw it and I ended up buying coilovers, stiffened up the ride, which obviously helps a lot with rubbing issues. Well, I could just get everything dialed in. So I got my ride height all customized, and unless I hit like really bad dips, I think, or if I had a bunch of people sitting in the back seats, for the most part, I really didn't have any rubbing issues. Hopefully that gives you an idea on that particular wheel spec, just what went into trying to make them fit. If you're willing to add a bunch of negative camber on the rear wheels, then you're most likely able to get around certain issues, especially if you're on coilovers. Now, obviously the story does not end there. Obviously, we always want to go more aggressive. From that point on, that's when all the Fender modifying had to start. I ended up finding a set of NK RPF 1s, and they were used for sale. They were powder coated in like a kind of like a darker purple color, and I really wanted them. But they were in a pretty aggressive spec. They were an 18 by 10, and I think it was a plus 38 offset. I will add, just right off front, with the 38 offset, I did need spacers in the front to clear the Brembos. I ended up, I believe, running just a 5mm spacer, so that essentially bumped me from what would be a 38 offset on the RPF ones to, I guess, like a 33 offset. Keep in mind that I did need to run spacers just to fit the Brembos. And as well, another area that was like kind of tight was the rears. Fitment wise with the fenders was tight, but also because the offset I think was still higher, being a plus 38, and the wheel was so wide, being 18 by 10, I was actually having like, I didn't have clearance issues, everything fit, but it was really, really close where the inside of the wheel came very close to contacting the coilover. So I did not have much clearance, like literally there was probably like maybe a couple credit cards, 2 or 3 credit cards worth of clearance, but I guess with that specific point on your car, just because everything really moves in unison. So like when your wheels move under compression, when your suspension compresses, it's moving together. As long as the wheels had just that little bit of space between the coilover, I knew I was always going to be good. Those were a couple just FYIs. But yeah, when I swapped to that wheel, and keep in mind that wheel also had a 265 35 18 tire. Definitely a very, very aggressive wheel setup. If you know these cars, that's very aggressive. And so at that point, that is when I really needed to start modifying the fenders. When it came to the fronts, I knew I was gonna have to get the fronts fully rolled. I was heavily considering doing the work at first myself, but in the end, I actually ended up chatting with a shop who actually seemed to be quite confident with that style of thing, as they had done it before. Feeling confident in their ability, I actually ended up going that route and having them do the work, and I'm really happy and thankful that I did, because I know they did a way better job than I ever would. And at the end of the day, I mean, this being kind of like my dream car and all, it's just like I didn't want to ultimately ruin anything or end up costing myself way more money. I mean, if anyone locally wants more information, I'm happy to let you know where I ended up taking it. So what I had to do to fit these RPF ones at the time was the shop ended up fully rolling the front fenders. You know, being quite aggressive, I think, where when they're during the roll, they're almost starting to kind of pull out the front fender a little bit. I don't know if you can actually tell or not. The other option is, and we didn't even do it, but I've seen it, create a little bit more of a gap between the fender and the door here. Back this off a little bit and bring this out a little. I think you can actually get a little more wheel clearance. If you're willing to obviously do that with your front fender. So that was another option if we had to, but we didn't even need to do that. So that was all that was done on the fronts. On the rears, this is where it gets interesting. There's a site linked in the description below, so you guys can go reference this. They have a full write-up on exactly how to pull these fenders, because there's quite a bit involved. But this is essentially what the shop would have done on my car. You're ultimately having on the 05 to 07s at least, this whole trim piece is held on by clips. And so you need to pull all the original trim pieces off. Sometimes they have a tendency to crack. These are actually brand new ones. I ordered these off a website and they came fully paint matched as well. And I'm really happy actually with how they came. So you'll have to pop the original trim off. Once this trim piece was popped off, that's when through rolling and even hammering and heating it up, they were able to like actually push out this metal. I actually think I have a couple pictures of my car prior to putting the fender trim back on. And so I'll show you guys actually those pictures, because once the shop did the actual fender pull on my car, I drove the car around for a little while. We actually did a couple revisions on the pulled fenders, because at first I actually wanted them pulled a little bit more, or I actually wanted to get the car just a smidge lower. But anyways, I will post those pictures so you can at least see kind of what I'm talking about and get a better idea for how much the fender actually got pulled. You'll kind of see how the body started to kind of lip out, pushing out this body. Because the body gets pushed out, the original clips that are underneath this trim, they're obviously unusable. So what you have to do is with like a really heavy duty, like a panel adhesive, usually you have to get it in like those tubes with like the caulking gun. You basically have to use that, because that's the only thing that's going to keep these fenders back on. And try and look up, it'll be in the forum write-up that I have linked below, but I can also try and look it up and figure out exactly what I used again. I had to get one of those, like it was like the dual caulking tube guns, because that's how it was actually sold. So yeah, it's some strong stuff, but I can tell you, I had these things done like, I don't know, at least a handful of years ago, and they have not budged. So it is very good stuff and it works. But I can just show you how clean of a job the shop did when it came to getting it back on. It just looks completely factory. I'll even show you the other side. You can just see for yourself. I ultimately wanted to get the car to sit a little bit lower than it was. When I discussed with the shop, they actually kind of mentioned to me there was some other options that they could do with the fender to help ultimately trimming a little bit of the metal away off the body underneath that rear trim. So instead of just simply pulling it out, they actually would take the bottom lip where it was kind of most flared out to give me that clearance, instead of just leaving it there. And you'd never know, because obviously this quarter panel trim sits right over top. The little bit of metal that was here, by trimming it, not only, like I said, did it give us that clearance, but it also basically allowed this trim piece to sit, I think, so much flatter. Just because even when I was trying to kind of test fit them on before, I could just tell that once you start to pull the body here so much, you can imagine it's going to impact how this wants to sit, and the overall just kind of like, you know, it's got to follow this line here. And so then even with the door and everything, right, you can imagine it'll get kind of complicated. So by trimming that little bit of metal right along here, it gave us not only that little bit of clearance, but it also allowed this trim piece to sit that much more flush and just like factory. Once they trimmed the bottom, obviously everything that they trimmed would have been fully sealed. So just to prevent, obviously, any water or moisture from getting into the actual metal. So all that cut metal would have been fully sealed up. And they actually are like a bit of a rust proofing shop as well, so they really take care of you as far as making sure you're not going to have any issues. And I can attest to that, because like I said, all my stuff was done a handful of years ago, and I think they look still perfect to this day. I was able to get the exact ride height that I was trying to go for. And really the only time I would rub is if I hit like really bad dips in the road when I'm going quite fast. That's the only time where maybe you get some of those little minor scrubs, but other than that, I really did not get any rubbing issues on such an aggressive wheel. And obviously if you followed me even on this YouTube channel, like even if you go backtrack and watch some of my videos from years ago, you'll see the exact setup, the RPF1 setup that I'm talking about. I even had like the Falcon Azeni tires with the tire lettering all around them and everything. They started off purple, and then I actually painted them black. There was definitely a few videos out there with that wheel setup, so if you're curious to see what that looked like with those specs, definitely go check out my past videos. But yeah, I obviously drove on that wheel setup for quite a while. It wasn't until the last, I don't even know what it's been, the last 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, when I finally ended up buying, I guess you could say, like the dream wheels, or just way too expensive wheels. But car's kind of gone through all the stages, going from like the XXRs to the RPF 1s, and now ultimately to the CE28s. And yeah, I'm super happy with the setup. Like I said, when I got these wheels, I didn't have to do any further fender upgrades. I had to dial in or just adjust my ride height, so I had to adjust the coilovers a little bit. As well, I had to adjust my camber. I think if I recall correctly, these wheels being a 9.5 wide with a 22 offset compared to the 10 wide with the, I guess, 38 offset. I think these wheels end up being just like the slightest bit, I don't know if it's like a few millimeters more aggressive than my RPF 1s. And so just fitting them, I had to just simply adjust some of the suspension components and then obviously get a new wheel alignment. There was about a few degrees of camber. I think I'm around, I don't know if it's close to 3 degrees in the back and 2.5 or 3 in the front. It's been a while since I've had an alignment done, especially because I haven't been driving the car recently. Like I said, if you have not checked my past videos, definitely go check those out. Full update on where things are at with regards to the engine rebuild. I'm doing something a little bit spicier than normal. I'm trying to create an engine setup that can hold a little bit more power so we can soup this thing up down the road here. I think I basically covered it all when it comes to what's been done as far as fender mods, you know, coilovers, a few degrees of camber, some pulled fenders, and you can also achieve a similar look. Obviously super aggressive. We got that Evo Fitment boys on the STi. You know, no matter what you guys currently have on your cars, let us know in the comments below what you're currently running. Is your car lowered? Is it stock suspension? You know, what's your current wheel setup and what wheel setup are you maybe hoping for? My thoughts is that, you know, if you're someone that's already previously modified your car and modified, you know, the wheels and ride height, you know, maybe we can get some feedback going in the comment section. I'm hoping that this video helped, hoping it maybe cleared some things up as far as giving you guys a better idea for, you know, what really goes into certain wheel setups as far as making them fit on our cars. They're not always easy, and so sometimes when you're looking at more aggressive wheels, you may hear some people saying, oh yeah, you can definitely run that setup, and then you hear other people saying, no way, you're gonna rub like crazy. Like, it really just depends on overall your ride height, how low you are, and how aggressive of a wheel setup you ultimately want. And really it just comes down to the amount of work you're willing to put in to the fenders. If you can do the work yourself, or if you have a shop in town that maybe can do it for you. Guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I wanted to just think of something else that I could make while the car is obviously not running. I want to obviously post more on this channel and be more consistent here. Like I said in past videos, I'm trying to post like once a week. If you guys have any other things that you want to see on the car or anything else that you want to know about the car, by all means, let me know. But yeah, like I said, I hope you guys enjoy it. Let us hear it in the comments, you know, let us know your current setups. Go GD, right? Anyways, I think that wraps us up for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.